Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone is having a great week. It is exciting times going on in Richmond today, and really excited to have this conversation around chronic absenteeism. Emily and I just finished editing all of the information from the first task force meeting on transportation, and we'll be pushing that out to school divisions and regional leaders to make sure that it is going on to everyone and that everyone across the state can have the same conversations we had around transportation. I have had a couple of updates. I think Dr. Straley had an emergency today and may be on by phone, but Carla has volunteered to fill in for him and is excited to be here and very appreciative for her stepping in that space. Also, happy to have so many other people on the phone. Oh, I see Doug's picture. So Doug must be finishing up with that emergency and able to join us. But Emily Ann, do you want to kick us off with a reminder of what we talked about last week, a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so thrilled to have another round tonight with all of you. We obviously grounded ourselves in our why and some of the new data we'll discuss further tonight, but really, why are we here and why is this work with the task force so important? One of the common threads that came up on the superintendent and VDOE's sort of road show after the all-in VA plan was announced was transportation barriers, whether it was rural, urban, suburban, small, or larger school divisions, or from families directly, wanting to arm school divisions with some additional supports to consider. So in that package that the superintendent mentioned, you'll have the PowerPoint from last week and meeting recap, as well as a discussion guide to be able to use whether at an individual school site or across your division, and helps guide with the video links and a set of collateral that tie in as well on understanding modes, tracking actual use, an example of what one of those dismissal trackers can look like that's interactive and you can modify to your own school division, and strategic differentiation. So we hope that that is helpful, and definitely want to hear any roadblocks as they come along, as well as success points and what works for your an individual student or a group of students or across your whole system. So really looking forward to that. Thank you to folks who reached out and gave feedback, and looking forward to digging in tonight.
Hi, everybody. Really excited to be here. I think Todd is going to pop up a PowerPoint today. And just want to, I know that everyone on the call is deeply vested in chronic absenteeism, has been working hard to focus on this and share that information, but also just want to level set for our audience members and talk through what is a chronic absence and what do we mean by chronic absence. So Todd, could you pull up that deck for us? Great, thanks so much. So want to talk through slide 2, which is what is a chronic absence. Thanks. When we talk about chronic absence, a lot of people across the Commonwealth think we're talking about unexcused absences, but the federal government talks about any time a child misses school. So that might include an excused absence for from a parent who a child might be sick. It might include a significant absence with a doctor's note. It might include an absence that just doesn't have any note or excuse with it, or an absence because of disciplinary reasons. So I want to make sure that chronic absenteeism is different than truancy. When we talk about chronic absenteeism, we're talking about any reason a student might miss school. So a lot of our conversations that we're having are about really understanding why a child might miss. There are obvious reasons a child should miss school if they're ill and they have a doctor's note, or if there is a disciplinary issue, but want to really level set that we're talking about all absences and the importance of understanding when anytime a child misses that daily instruction and misses that opportunity to be engaged, they're missing the opportunity to be a part of programming, to be a part of the nutritional experiences at school, and most importantly, the academic things that will help a student. So on the next slide, which I'm going to need a little help. Thank you. We know that pre-pandemic, nationally, 8 million students were considered chronically absent. In Virginia, it was about 1 in 10 students. But now we know in Virginia that chronic absenteeism has more than doubled, and that we are currently now affecting 1 in 5 students, and that number remains high. But most importantly, some of our most at-risk student groups, including our economically disadvantaged students, our Black Latino students, are missing even higher, and our absences are even higher at the high school level. So we're going to go on to the next slide. We're just going to level set with Virginia data and really understand what it looks like over post-pandemic years and dig into that. 41,000 more students are chronically absent today in those middle grades. And I think it's important to talk about those middle grades because a lot of times people think chronic absenteeism happens maybe with kindergartners or high schoolers, students who are new to school, or students who are in high school and drive and might have other activities that compete with high school, but it's actually persistently impacting our middle grade students as well. And we're going to flip to the next slide and talk about just the differences with our student groups and really look at the drastic changes in some of our most fragile student groups. So when we talk about our Black students, our student group that is federally identified, we're looking at 20%, 1 in 5 students. When we're looking at students who are economically disadvantaged or have fiscal needs in the home, it's 1 in 4 students. And our Hispanic students, it's 1 in 5. And our students with disabilities, it's almost 1 in 4. Those are startling numbers. When we talk about chronic absenteeism being missing more than 2 days of school a month on average, our students who are struggling are missing even more school and having even more opportunities to be further and further behind. So Emily Ann kicked us off a little bit reviewing transportation, but want to encourage everyone who's watching to continue to think about the transportation barriers and some of those great solutions that we talked about last time. This month, we're going to talk about parent and family engagement, and we're really going to dig into how important it is to engage our families. So when we look at attendance work and some of the data that they're sharing with us, they really talk about how important it is to build capacity with our families and the importance of developing families. So tonight we're really going to dig in on those family school partnerships and how we think about really building strong partnerships with our families. As I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of news media and constituents that are really interested, they ask about why families are allowing students to miss school. And we talk a lot about during the pandemic, we asked our families to keep our children home. And we asked them if a child might be sick to stay home because it was safer to keep them at home. But we need to build those family school partnerships, and we need to help our families understand that school divisions are doing amazing things in their schools. They're providing breakfast after the bell, they're providing mental health supports, they're providing exceptional academic programming, they're providing intervention and tutoring. But if a child isn't coming to school, they don't have the opportunity to work with all of those things. So we need to really engage our families. A lot of times our families have barriers to bringing their children to school. Emily Ann and our consultants last month talked a lot about transportation barriers, but the most important thing our family can do is reach out to that school, to that teacher, to that principal, and that school counselor, and build those relationships, because we know when our educators and our families come together, they're able to solve those problems together. So really thinking about building the capacity of our families through student partnerships in the school environment and making sure those partnerships are built together. This is a great fancy graphic, which is hard to read as I can see everybody trying to dig in, but we'll put this out in the handouts to make sure that you can dig into this. But it really talks about connecting families to supportive people inside the school, whether it's our counselors, our principals, or our support people inside the school to build those capacity and supports. So as we move on to the next slide, what Attendance Works and nationally they ask us to really think about is our families bring their children to school to have hope for a better future, faith that the school is going to help our children succeed. They want voice in the decisions that affect them and their children, and they need access to the support and services. So, as we think about those four pieces that a family might need inside of a school, we really want to think about those four pieces. And we're really lucky tonight. Laura Downs, who is on our task force, is a guest from Attendance Works and really helped build some of these resources. So I might pause a couple of times as we work through some of these conversations and let her lean in. And I might call on her right now. As we think about families, Laura, and as we think about these four pieces, is there an important call out that we should be talking about as a task force when our families think about school?
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for inviting me this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I think, Lisa, you're framing it absolutely right, which is about partnerships, and it's about building the capacity for families to partner with schools. We more importantly have to build the capacity of our school staff to partner with families. And so it really needs to be an asset-based approach, knowing that families do have hopes and dreams for their children, and then how do our teachers and all of our school staff recognize and support those hopes and dreams. So I think you're on absolutely the right track here. And again, it's giving voice to parents. It's also giving the space for staff to build those relationships. Thank you, Lisa.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. And thank you so much for representing Attendance Works. They're truly leading the work nationally and really helping states and school divisions across the country think about re-engaging families and really thinking about how to connect with families. So appreciate you being on the call and helping us collaborate. Anyone else want to chat about these four things and bringing families around hope, faith, voice, and access to the school, and anything in general that you're thinking about or things that you've done in your own communities around these four areas as we launch this conversation around family engagement?
I can jump in. This is Clint Mitchell, superintendent from Colonial Beach Public Schools. It's good to be with everyone today. So this is something that I'm very, very passionate about, as a leader. One of the things that we do very similar to what Dr. Coons put on the board on the screen with the dual capacity framework, we use something very similar called an action team for partnership, which is based on the work of Dr. Joyce Epstein, who is one of the gurus around family partnerships. And what we do with that is we have our clinical team, teachers, as well as the business community, as well as families. I have several families who sit on a monthly basis, and what they do is they provide us really input on how we can better serve them, and how we could better meet the needs of their children, and how we could get them engaged a little bit more within the school. And one of the things that we did, and we're getting ready to really launch this in our school district as part of the chronic absenteeism work that we're doing, is when we do our home visits, sometimes parents may not be home. And so I've been working closely with my coordinator of human resources, and we're going to be launching, and I know you can't really see it on the screen, but this is really, I don't know if you ever have someone, maybe the gas company, come and deliver gas at your house, and somehow, some way, they leave you a note, a little door hanger that tells you they were there, but then they leave you with a bill and a receipt that you got to pay later on, even though you didn't call them. So what we're going to do is, when we do our home visit with families, we have this little two-sided door hanger we're going to leave on the door, just to make it less intrusive. On one side, it talked about what Dr. Coons mentioned, which is just missing 2 days of school each month equates to that 10% of the school year. And what we're doing on the other side is we're talking about, hey, sorry we missed you, but we're going to ask you to please call and reschedule a time so we could discuss your child's attendance in school. So it's something that we are doing as part of that task force that we started at both schools in Colonial Beach. And I just wanted to kind of share that as a possible resource just to engage families and let them know that you were there, you care about them, and that you are their residents, because sometimes we make the visit, no one is here, and we typically don't leave anything for the parents to be able to come back and call the school. So this little door tag is something that we're going to be launching starting next week as we make our school visits to continuously engage our families.
Nice.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share as we move through how to build those partnerships and that connectivity? Love the opportunity for that two-way engagement and really allowing families to come back in and connect. Okay, I will find some more friends to talk to us, but appreciate that, Dr. Mitchell. On our next slide, I want us to remember that as we think about our families and they are thinking about their hopes for their children, the faith in the school, the voice and the access, they are really wanting us to be partnership focused. They want to have that collaborative nature, and we need to really focus on moving from a problem to a partnership. How do we connect with our families? How do we listen and dream with our families? How do we highlight those strengths, even in the midst of the challenges? And how do we collaborate with our families to build those practices? And I just want to give a shout out because as we're thinking about these pieces, I want us to continue to remember that Attendance Works has a wealth of resources, and I'm going to highlight a few of these as we move through the conversation. But one of the most important pieces as we think about this as a state, and some of the highlights for some of the school divisions who are part of this collaborative conversation are on slide 11. When we talk about what Dr. Mitchell just shared is this two-way supportive communication about attendance and engagement. Second, on the next slide, I wish I could, thank you. Provide tailored, personalized, caring messages to students who are absent and making sure it's a personal connection and not so much of a robocall. And then offer those action steps and make sure families receive updated health guidance. And we're going to share some of those resources today. So as we dig in a little bit deeper into thinking about our families and thinking about what we want to do, I want to share one set of resources on the handouts for families, and want to make sure that everyone is aware of on the call that the first thing that we've been talking about as a state, and the first thing we want to think about together as a task force with families is the messaging and attendance campaigns. The state has really launched the Attendance Matters VA campaign, done a lot of social media and a lot of conversations around that. But I want to share with you that Attendance Works has some great national resources that are starting places. A lot of our school divisions have a lot of things going on, and replicating and building resources takes a lot of work. So I want to share some ready-made handouts that think about how we communicate with all families and how we really think about all families and their support. So some of the resources on handouts for families on the Attendance Works website are great starting points to build those messaging campaigns and build that work. I also want to highlight a great new resource on Attendance Works website, which helps our families understand about when to bring children to school and when to keep them home. So they have a great health guidance resource that talks to families directly about if your child has a fever. Should they stay home? Should they come to school? What kinds of persistent coughs, rash, eye irritation, sore throat, what kind of things constitute I should keep my child home? We are in a post-pandemic space. We were liberal with our families about when children should stay home for health reasons. This very simple, easy handout that is supported by national pediatricians allows our families to have great guidance on when should my child stay at home? When is it best for them to stay at home? And when do I really need to start thinking about bringing them to school? And as we think about messaging campaigns and as we think about relationship building with our families, it's important for our families to understand when they should keep children home and when they don't. I know that I have family members who think that anytime their child has a tummy ache, they should keep that child at home. And maybe that's not the best space for them. Maybe that child should come to school, and handouts like this that schools send home help families understand those benchmarks and those reasons for keeping children at home. So want to highlight that resource and that availability. And as we move on to the slide, there are also opportunities to help families think about attendance. And we do great work as schools thinking about setting academic goals. How many books do I want to read? How much do I want to grow from this benchmark test to this benchmark test? How much do I want to be able to do? What do I want my grades to be on my report card? We may also need to help families at this point in time think about attendance. What are the routines at home that help a child come to school every day? Who might need to help if I work a lot and I have different work schedules, and I might be working in the evening or working in the morning while my child goes to school? Who might be the helper to get my child ready? Who might be the support person to make sure my child is able to make it to school? How do I track my child's attendances? We've talked a lot across the state about missing 2 days a month. But how do I, as a parent, know when my child has missed 2 days a month? I get busy, I may not keep track. How do I make sure I'm tracking those? Those types of resources that help the family be a partner and setting the family up for success are important resources that we need to think about providing, in particular for our younger students. As families are moving from a preschool environment to a kindergarten environment, it's really important for our families to understand that coming to school every day is critical. As we think about the important things our kindergarten teachers are doing around Sounds First and reading and academics, we want families to understand that if a child misses school, it becomes a critical opportunity. I know that several of our school divisions are here limping along. A few of them are ill, a few of them are injured. So would love any of our school folks to come off of mute and maybe talk about anything they're doing around health and setting up families for success, maybe a school-wide or a school division-wide campaign around really engaging families to understand when to bring kids to school, when not to bring the kids to school, and those attendance pieces. Keith, I see your hand up. Thanks for sharing.
So absolutely. So I know that all across Southwest Virginia, we're doing all kinds of campaigning and working with families and parents to try to encourage them to get to school, to provide resources. In a previous division I worked in, they actually had a program they called Scuba, where we were able to use some of the COVID funds that we had to provide transportation to those families whose child may have missed the bus or they overslept and didn't have the transportation to get them there. But I also think it's about building a culture. I think a campaign is great and it's a great place to start, but I think this is a problem that'll be solved over time because you create a culture where families know how much you care about them and their children and that you're invested in their success for a lot of different reasons. And I think part of that culture, when schools were closed during COVID, I think we had a little hit to that culture. A lot of school divisions those that came back sooner maybe actually saw that culture improve. But I do believe that this is part of the solution. There's it's a multifaceted problem, so it's going to take multifaceted solutions. Just like you talked about, letting parents know. I know Smith County, for example, in our neck of the woods, they have in every convenience store and grocery store and gas station and every place that folks are out publicly a list of those 5 reasons that maybe you should consider keeping your child home. So it's not just about a robocall or putting something on Facebook. It's trying to saturate the entire community. We, for example, in Washington County, 2 of the main issues that we're faced with education right now, I think, are student mental health and chronic absenteeism. However, the SOQs that we currently have fund exactly 0 positions to address that. And so we're trying to find some local money and even some of the all-in money to use to to hire folks whose specialty are in those areas, so that we can, instead of us trying to be an instructional leader and a floor cleaner and a bus driver, try to deal with some of those other issues and get experts on our team that can help with that as well. So those are just a few examples of things that we're doing proactively in Southwest Virginia to help alleviate this issue and concern.
Really appreciate that, Dr. Berrigan. I think it's important, as you talked about, what are these right spaces, and reminders that these are a little bit different in everybody's community and everybody's resource. But I think it's important that, as you said, we have someone focusing on attendance and someone focusing on re-engaging our students and making sure that they're there. As we move to slide 15 and targeted outreach, we've been talking a lot about this whole universal approach and what should we be doing for all families? What are these messaging campaigns? What are these tracking? What are these spaces where we do those things? We also want to think about that targeted outreach. Some of our families need a little bit more support. As Dr. Berrigan mentioned, he said, we have some people who go out and specifically support our students. So our students who are missing that 10 to 20% of school, those students who are in that chronic absenteeism might need, as Dr. Mitchell suggested, that door knocking, that home visit, that additional outreach, that personal space. So as our school divisions are thinking about what do all families need? All families might need that healthy guidance about when to bring kids to school and when not to. We might need targeted outreach for family plans or home visits in those spaces. And then what do we need to think about for our students who are missing a large majority of school? Our students who are actually missing 4, 5, 6 days a month, who are really struggling to make it to school. There's some intensive barriers there, and we really need to think about some plans and strategies to support those families that might involve some deeper supports and some deeper interventions for those families and helping connect those students a little bit more. So as we think about attendance and as we think about engaging families, we've talked a little bit in our opening about this universal messaging and this universal strategy to help all of our families. And what are those kinds of things we want to do for all of those families? And Laura put in the chat that all families in elementary, middle, and high school might need a little bit different messaging, and attendance work has tailored those to those different grade bands. But we also want to think about what do we need to do for those students right now who have walked through September and October and are missing 10% of that school? And what does it look like when we get to those students who are missing 4 and 5 days a month? Right now in October and November, we have to start re-engaging those families and providing some direct support and assistance so that we're thinking about catching those students before they miss an entire year with those strategies. I do want to note that Attendance Works has an additional playbook to think about these tiers and to bring to your attendance teams. So it might be a little bit different in Smith County, might be a little bit different in Washington County, might be a little bit different in Cumberland County, might be a little bit different in Newport News, but this playbook is a great tool. And I want to say a special thanks to Future Ed and Attendance Works for building this playbook and an implementation guide, because it allows your teams to come together and think a little bit differently. What do we want to do for all of our families, all of our students? Elementary, middle, high school might look a little different. What are those targeted pieces that we might be thinking about for our students who are missing that 10 to 20%? And what are some of those pieces we really need to dig into for those students who are missing a large volume of school? So really want to call out this wonderful resource. It's one of the best in the country that helps teams sit down and talk about this family engagement and this critical piece around attendance and how to build those strategies. And I do want to call out, as Dr. Berrigan said, this might take some specific tailored folks on your team. And I do want to mention that Carla, we have a special attendance person on the call. I'm looking for Carla. I think Carla Alpern is here. Hi, Carla.
I'm here.
She actually leads this attendance works in Louisa County, and it leads the whole program for Louisa County. Anything you might want to mention in general, because I know you're speaking more deeply in a little bit, but anything in general before we dig into some other resources to think about our families?
Well, first, I wanted to thank you for the Attendance Works resources. We have used those in the past. They are phenomenal. Some of the newer resources you shared, I'm excited to bring back to our team. I do want to reiterate what Dr. Peregrine had said about mental health. That is a huge piece that we found has really been more of an issue, even more so than before COVID. And it's amazing what the relationships you build with families, with parents and students, what you can find out. I mean, there are some students who have opted not to come to school for things like they don't know where to sit in the cafeteria. And so it's through that conversation with the student, with the parent about, what supports they need so they can come to school, or other things like they've missed a day of school. So they're worried about the makeup work coming back and the transition period back into school, and making sure that teachers and other support personnel in the schools know how to transition those students back so they're not missing more school. But I just want to concur with whatever has already been said, because those are the things we're seeing too and are trying to address in Louise as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And if a child is struggling with mental health or is uncomfortable about the cafeteria or the schoolwork, the best place for them is to come into school, because they can solve those problems. And before they become bigger mental health issues or bigger concerns or bigger, worries and stressors that lead to bigger issues, it's important for those spaces and the resources that school divisions have. And school divisions have such amazing resources to be able to support that. Whereas if a child's at home, they're building up more of that stress and emotional needs without the resources and help that they can receive in school. So great point. I want to talk about some off the box kind of strategies. A lot of times we have parent nights and we have parent meetings. And sometimes in our Title I parent meetings, we talk about reading and we talk about maybe looking at a child's report card and the important goals. But the other thing I want to share about Attendance Works, and one of the things that I think is really interesting about Attendance Works, is they have activities you can do with families. And as a former school person in Metro Nashville Public Schools, I did this activity in 2 different family nights. Really love this activity because a lot of times parents don't actually feel the gap of missing school. And illustrating the gap actually has family members line up and start with the first day of school. And then they move them almost like Candyland through a board, and a child who misses school gets stuck, and a child who goes to school moves forward. And it really illustrates the gap of attendance and how much the attendance moves some children forward. It seems really simple, but this activity was one of the most powerful activities for our families. And some of our families went back to the school principal and said, I still remember that is still illustrating the gap activity. I still remember what that meant, and it helped us change and makes coming to school really important. So I want to call out and remind everyone what that looks like when you do these activities and when you actually visually have these activities on family nights, and have families feel what it feels like. If you flip over to slide 18. Sometimes this is the graphic that goes behind illustrating the gap and shows the differences between what a child who typically moves through those rates and then a child who is struggling, and what happens when that child is missing school. So Todd, we need a couple of clicks because there's some really cool interactive pieces to this, and this can happen during that activity with families. The Department of Ed is looking for a school to model this and record it so we can use this as a resource for families. I think Attendance Works would love to have this as well. But activities like this, please don't discount how important they are for families. And some of the resources that physically, we do a lot of learn to read, and we show families about reading, and we show families about report cards. But this is also an important activity on family nights that can really help our families deeply understand what happens when children miss more and more school. And then one more activity I just want to call out is there's another activity called Parent Prep. And this might be a targeted or an intensive activity with a parent group that allows families to think about how they prepare their kiddos and how they prepare their kiddos for school. So another opportunity. Want to pause here before we talk about incentive programs and some of the ways incentive programs can help us engage families. Laura, I know you've done a lot of work from attendance work with some of these activities. Anything that I missed talking about some of these pieces? And then John Farrell came in the chat and love to hear some of his thoughts as well.
So just real quick, a couple of things, Dr. Coons. When you're doing illustrating the gap, that's just one exercise. There's several that we have on our website. We also have videos of parents talking about the importance of attendance and that when they paid attention to it, what a difference it made. Parents sometimes want to hear from other parents. So we do also have videos that you can use at family nights. And the other thing is in the student success plan that Lisa shared with you, there's a calendar. And if you check off the days that a student is absent and the teacher uses that in parent teacher night, it's just another visual where the parents can go, oh, I didn't realize that. So again, visual learners really need those things. And for many of our families, they don't like us just talking at them. And so one other tool, Lisa, that you didn't raise up, which I'll raise up, is we also have a caring conversations framework. So it helps teachers and others have these caring conversations. It's not yet about attendance. It's about relationship building. So really having those conversations before we get the bad news about we've missed school. So those are just two other pieces.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Laura, and appreciate the importance that you placed on building those relationships and building those opportunities for families to feel comfortable and engage in school. Super important. John, you had some medical input as a pediatrician on some of these conversations.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of attending Elliot Atisha's presentation at the AAP meeting. He's an amazing physician who works with Attendance Works, and so I got to really dive deep. That handout that was presented for the medical reasons for keeping kids home is it's actually revolutionary because there's a lot of issues with kids staying home for 24 hours fever-free. Just changing it to the definition that is on that handout could not completely resolve this problem, but make a big difference. And also the issue with pink eye and red eye, which he went into great detail about keeping kids home way too conservatively. And the last thing that I'm also seeing, and I put that in the chat, is a surprising number of families have become very conservative and they're keeping their entire sibling group home when one is sick, and it is adding up to just untenable numbers of days of absenteeism. So I think just you guys have talked about partnership, and our school health committee has a great relationship with VDOE, meeting with Tracy White and Joanna Pitts from VDH, and just making sure that all of the nurses in the school and the health aides in the school really use the definitions on this page. I think as a medical physician, I am wholeheartedly in favor of a lot of these. And I know it's kind of hard to read, but really a few of these changes could make a big difference just from a medical standpoint. So just wanted to weigh in for my support. Thanks.
No, really appreciate that. Principal Mabe, we have not gotten to hear from you. Any thoughts on some of these activities, handouts, resources from a school principal position? Scott, I'd love for you to weigh in after that as well.
So I just wanted to let you know that as a principal, I have seen some success addressing attendance problems, and we've seen some almost defeat. But one of the things that was most successful at our school in that category of relationships was our 21st Century program. When we have a robust after-school program and we're able to get those families in on a regular basis and for opportunities that are wonderful for the whole family to participate in, we do see a decrease in the attendance problem. Looking at these materials that you guys have provided for us today. I've already been taking some notes. We actually have our title program this month, and I'm hoping that it will be on attendance and the importance of attendance. And if that goes well, I'll be happy to share that with you guys, and I will try to make a video or two of our families participating.
Love that. Would really appreciate that. That would be wonderful.
Yes, thank you for allowing me a chance to share. Looking at the high school level, one of my assistant principals, she has really done a great job of putting together like a goal and award handout that she sends home for our students. And for us, we've kind of looked deep into it for 2 years, and we found that when students are late to school, we have a lot of kids that are late. We have a lot of drivers and a lot of parents that drop their students off. And when they're late, if we tie discipline to tardiness, we found that those students will just not come and will either find a doctor's note or find a way to get an excused absence. And so we've moved away from discipline, and we've kind of went more to an awards based incentive. And we've shortened the period of time that we measure attendance. And so instead of looking at a whole semester, if you miss only so many days, we have shortened that down to like 4.5 weeks. So that's a midterm for us. And so we award kids for being there a certain number of days. And again, my assistant, she's passionate about it. So she did a great job of breaking that down. We're seeing an increase overall in kids who are borderline at risk. And so that's one of the handouts, you've mentioned handouts that we send home just to kind of to look at what are some reasons to come to school. We do put some discipline to it. When you think about proms and extracurricular activities, our students in Southwest Virginia, they enjoy the prom and they enjoy those types of social events. And so we attach some attendance criteria to that. And that certainly has helped too.
Great. Tien, we haven't heard much from you as our parent member. Any thoughts on some of the conversations we've been having around parents?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for calling me out here. And actually, I just want to piggyback on Scott's comment earlier. And tardiness, excessive tardiness is quite an issue. And so from where I live here in Fairfax County, and I have spoken to 2 high school principals, McLean High School and Langley, both principals, I've spoke to them, had sit-down conversation one-on-one on the excessive tardy issue. So what I don't understand as a parent's perspective, that why schools not disciplining these children when they're like tardy 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour at a time. When that happens, the next step and will be complete absentee, will be skipping schools. So that basically tardy has been it's a progression. You start from tardy 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and become excessive and become prolonged tardiness, and then it's absentee. Scott mentioned that seems like if you discipline the children who are tardy, they just don't come to school at all. I wonder how common that is. And when I spoke to those 2 principals, asking the same question, why those students are not being disciplined, and their answer to me is exact the same. I spoke to both these 2 principals at 2 separate occasions and several months apart, but the answer is the same. They were telling me that there have been so many much more serious problems at school, like drugs and fentanyl and bullying, a lot more serious issue going on. And tardiness is just one of the issues, like just so trivial to them, not worth their time, basically. And that will lead into absenteeism. And so actually I'm having a meeting with FCPS superintendent tomorrow. And I'm going to raise this issue to her as well, see how to address that from early on, from the tardiness standpoint. And I understand there's partnership with families, very, very important. As a parent myself, and in my family, we are strongly emphasize that you're not skipping school for whatever reason. And, you know, I jokingly, like, you know, even I die, you go to school, you're not going to my funeral. And that's just how much we emphasize that. But I know not all families are emphasizing that. My question is, aside from like family not being a emphasize that priority being going to school, how much of our absenteeism we see in Virginia resulted from children themselves or being defiant and oppositional, and there's parents want to do something, there's nothing you can do, and you can't just drag their ankle, handcuff them, and you know, drop them at school. And especially high school students, when they're at the point, especially when they're suffering some mental health issues, bully at school or social anxiety, they refuse to go because of that. And how do we address that? And also, do we have statistics to show that which grades from the K to 12, which grades we see the most absentee issues?
Yes, and I think we're going to work on getting some of that kind of data to you. And I think one of our next pieces will be on this bullying, mental health, some of those spaces. I think Emily Ann is working on a deep dive there. So great call outs, great pieces around, I think a lot of you talking about tardies and how it leads to attendance, and that is an important space. I want to dig in to what Principal Maves and Principal Vermillion kind of talked about around incentives and the importance of incentives, and potentially less on the negatives but more on the positives, and how we get to the positives on slide 25. We want to like pivot a little bit to how we engage our families and our students, recognizing our families and our students around attendance incentives. So as we think about, and we've talked a lot about relationships, as you look through this whole deck, there's a little bit more digging in on relationships, but just being cognizant on our time and making sure that we are thinking through everything that we have on our agenda tonight. Want to like flag some things around attendance. What we have learned from a lot of the research that Attendance Works has done out of Johns Hopkins University is there are positives with recognizing attendance and using incentive programs. However, there are specific characteristics of successful attendance incentives. Some of the things that cause challenges, and as we're thinking about attendance and as we've looked at a lot of all-in plans, there's a lot of conversations happening across the state around incentives. So want to think about incentives, and as Principal Mabe said, we should recognize families and we should recognize children. So talking through this incentive option, one of the downfalls is only recognizing perfect attendance, because once a child misses, they never get the opportunity to be recognized. So how do we recognize a child who's improving their attendance? How do we put incentive as part, not the magic bullet? Not using something that is the incentive, like extra recess or pizza parties, or this is the magic yes button. This is the thing we use for every incentive, and make it personalized to this space. And then really thinking about specific student groups. If transportation is truly an issue for this group of students, and it is a transportation issue, and leaving them out of an incentive program just reinforces the challenges to getting to school and thinking about those spaces. So these are some of the common pitfalls. But as we move to what we should be doing and thinking about the most effective things, this is what we really want to lean into as people across the state are thinking about incentive programs and really thinking about incentives. Good and improved attendance. So maybe not just perfect, but someone who's showing good attendance, someone who has the most improved attendance, thinking about that as a comprehensive approach, not the silver bullet. And then thinking about things that are meaningful to students and families. I think in the chat, someone said donating, they have someone who donates pizza cards to families. That's a little bit different than having a classroom pizza party. And thinking about those things that are personally significant and meaningful for families is an important piece. And I think Scott talked about this, how you track more frequently and more frequent incentives, and the importance of frequency and incentives to reinforce behavior is really important. And I think Scott also said it's a culture strategy, right? It's about hooking students and it's about making it value and giving excitement. And I think it's also about saying attendance matters. We care about attendance. We're tracking attendance, and you're doing well in attendance. And we want to really think about that. So as you think about your recognition and as you think about this program, this is going to be unique for everyone across the state. Whose behavior are we incentivizing? Families, students, a particular group of students? What types of incentives should we select that will change the behavior? How can the incentive be offered most effectively? And did it work, and how do you know? I think one of the things we do in education, I was talking to a group earlier today, is we do things, we lean in incentive programs, we lean in to things, but we don't actually know if they're working. So one of the most important things I recommend as people are thinking about attendance and thinking about attendance across the state is really to understand, is it working? And know how you're collecting your data to make sure it's working. And then we have one more slide, Todd, that I just want to lean in on before we transition. It is slide 28. It's the graphic. So as we think about meaningful attendance, as we think about these incentives, really want to think about the thing on the top. This is a sense of pride and belonging. You're still thinking about attendance as relationships, relationship with students, relationships with families. How do you strengthen those relationships and build pride and belonging in your school? And how do you help students and families internalize that value of coming to school every day? And how do you reinforce improvements? So think about this. And then ultimately, we want children to come to school because school is where learning happens. And we know if students come to school every day, they have better opportunities. We know that if a student comes to school every day, they're going to perform 18% better in reading and 25% better in mathematics. And we need to continue to push on those elements that help the learning environment. Really appreciate the conversations. Going to pause right here for anyone to come off of mute and talk through all of the things we've talked about engaging families, about really creating those relationships and those important partnerships, whether it's communications, targeted strategies, thinking about those visual activities during Title I, or thinking about incentive programs. Would love to hear from everybody else about what you're thinking about right now.
Superintendent Coons, I'm going to jump in. One of the tips we've heard from a few schools is that they've actually leveraged hospitality training in order to really overhaul sort of their front desk main office team, and like, what is the mannerism, the tone, the experience of a family at their first touch point, and leverage some of their community allies to kind of conduct a run through of what is that like when you're on the phone, and just thinking about it a little bit differently, which has been really welcoming and family inclusive. So I hope that's helpful.
Hi, this is Tian again, and I saw Scott's comment in the chat, and I couldn't agree more that the first person a student engage with the school has a great impact on the students' timeliness, and I couldn't agree with that more. So my family is a military family. My children have been through 7 different schools, and we notice the impact when the first person at the school, when you drop them off, if that person is cheerful, friendly, welcoming, make it exciting for the children. The children are more likely to be in school on time and excited to go to school. And I have heard such comment from my own children. Thank you for that, Scott.
Yeah, really good point. I think that's very important.
Well, Dr. Coons, on that, one of the things as we started talking about more and more about attendance, talking about the hospitality piece, we did a customer service training with their office staff this past summer. We spent 3 hours. We partnered with the local Chamber of Commerce to do that. with an organization of just, it's the first interaction, the phone calls and different things such as that. And then also just working on, the family engagement, making school a place where families want to be, whether it's incorporating student-led conferences where students are showing their families about the work that they're doing and different things, and making the work accessible to parents, and things such as Seesaw, where we upload samples where you can see a progression of a student's, from the first day of school to mid to the end of the year, the progression of their work, whether there's been growth or, some setbacks and how we overcame that. But then another piece that I think that we focus on, and I think all school divisions is that we have to make schools a place where our staff wants to be. And if our staff wants to be, that translate into the kids and the families wanting to be here. And that, that there's no perfect science to that, and that takes work, but you have to make it a place where that if a whether it's a bus driver, whether it's a school nutrition, whether it's a custodian, whether it's an administrative assistant, teacher, paraprofessional, if they want to come to work every day and it's a place where they feel valued and supported, that's going to translate to the kids, which ultimately goes to the families. Because one thing, I've been doing this for a minute or two, you don't always agree with families on everything, but if a family feels that you're doing what's in the best interest of their student and and those kind of things, there's a trust and there's a relationship. And as you reach out and do different things, when there is an issue, they support you and move through it. So that's just my thoughts.
I would agree, because I had the opportunity to be in your front office of all of your schools last week. And from pianos to welcoming to positive messages all over the front desks, you have clearly translated that to your family. So I sincerely can vouch for the awesome opening that every single one of your schools has.
And one more thing I want to add to that. One of the, everyone's busy, and I get that, but just being visible, whether it's visible during unloading time, whether it's car rider duty, whether it's bus rider duty, whether it's at different events where you're out and about, no matter the position that you're in, so people see you, that you value everything's going on, you value their attendance by you being there. And I think that goes a long way. And one of the things we talked about, the robocalls, sometimes you have to do that because it's the message that has to go, but putting a voice to it, not the robocall voice, but a personal voice to it, makes a difference. So I've seen that, especially during COVID.
Mm-hmm. I think that's sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to slide in, but I'll wait for you to finish first.
Dr. Mitchell, go ahead.
So the other thing I wanted to just add, and just listening to what's being shared, I want to go back to this issue around incentives. I wholeheartedly agree with the slide on moving away from this old tradition of recognizing kids through incentives to be in school. It's an old practice, but it's a practice that I think is really relevant to the work that we do, is this whole idea of bold origin education. We used to have this idea where we talk about, I as an individual, as a student, I'm responsible for my actions and what I do. So to go to Tian's point, if I'm a student, it's my responsibility as a high schooler to get to school. Why am I tardy, right? Why is it that I'm coming in late? Obviously, there are a multitude of reasons why a child may be late to school. But one of the things that we've tried to do, even when I was a principal, and I'm so elated because my elementary principal have now started this process this year, is on the Baldrige side, looking at the idea of being response able, right? And how am I response able for the entire group? So as a classroom, what we do is we have students who hold each other accountable through different incentives and different ideas as to why we need to be in school. So if you have 2-3 classes per grade level, sometimes inherently something as simple as, kids love, especially elementary, they love all kind of stuffed animals. So I know my elementary principal have this humongous dinosaur She called it a tendosaurus. And what she does is, as the grade level or the class within that grade level who has the best attendance. And so we found some, I know as a principal, using Baldrige education tool that we used to hold each other accountable. And I'm just elated to see that the elementary principal is taking that concept and really trying to get students to hold each other accountable. We're talking about as early as the elementary grades. And kids ask each other, why were you in school today? Why are you leaving early? Or and now the same thing can be translated into the high school. So we have to really change our mindset and not put all of the work on parents, because we know they do the best that they can. And we don't know their circumstances. We don't know what they bring to the table. We don't know how many jobs they got to go for to get kids to school. Sometimes the kids have to take themselves to school. But how can we allow children to hold each other accountable within the context of the classroom and our school buildings, and making sure that that we have this continuous conversation. So I think that's a very important that needs to be added to the conversation, and that is children just holding each other accountable as part of the process.
I think that's a really, really good point, Dr. Mitchell. Very good a point. I wish we could have like 4 hours for these meetings, because we are generating such important conversations, and really excited because now as we're having these conversations, I know Emily Ann and I are thinking about what are the discussion questions we want to put in place so that other people across the state can have these questions. So really appreciate that. And Michelle, I'm reading for her in the chat because she is not feeling well. And she says, when I was a principal, we had attendance captains in middle schools where the attendance captain was responsible for calculating the attendance of the homeroom. And at the end of the week, the attendance captain from each grade level would meet with the principal to identify the team that had the best attendance and the most improved attendance. So great resources and strategies. And I see Chris Johnson's hand up. So we're going to let him go. And then we're going to turn it over to Carla, and she's going to talk a little bit about a program that's happening in Louisa. So Chris, go for it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Coons. I appreciate being part of this group. Don't feel real adequate with all the educators here, but from our standpoint with, I love the education. We're going to educate the families. I think that's great. And the relationships, I think that we have a lot of work in that area. And then I feel a little bit like a hypocrite because we have to discipline too. The first thing we do is we send children out for 10 days, and that represents, that puts them in the list right away. And I know that we're working on meaningful engagement during that time and some other things, but I hope I can talk to my other board members and make them realize that we're putting the kids at a greater disadvantage. But the public requires us the discipline. I mean, this election season has not been easy. It has been brutal for us, and it has a lot to do with behavior in schools. And so I don't know where that balance is, but we need to find it. But I see all the incentives we're talking about, and I respect all that. But what teeth do we really have when education and relationships and incentives don't work? What teeth do we have to really go and say, parent, you're hurting your child, you're not bringing them to school, and not only are you not hurting them, helping them prepare for their future, you're teaching them habits that'll get them fired in the future. And I'm concerned about that.
Well, I think we're going to talk about that towards the end. I think Dr. Paragon's talk about the other side of the coin, and I think, right, we have to do both, right? We have to really build these relationships, build these incentives, build these opportunities to help instill and reinstill the culture and make sure that we have health. But I think, Carla's going to talk a little bit about meaningful engagement and how to make sure we hold some collective community accountability. And then Keith's going to talk a little bit about helping our families understand with a little bit of teeth with it as well. So I'm going to turn it over now to two of our task force members that I've asked to really dig in and share. And I think, Chris, you could not have set them up better for this conversation. So appreciate that.
Thank you. I guess I should have just been a little bit more patient. So thank you.
You're great. You're great. No, very helpful.
So I'm Carla Alpern from Louisa County, and I just want to piggyback on what was said. One of the toughest subgroups that we work with is actually our talented and gifted and our high level students, because they have it in their heads, especially since COVID, when they were working virtually, that they can do it all by themselves and they don't need a teacher. So why should I have to come to school? So those are some of the tough conversations we have, and we lead that to different things in terms of accountability when they get out of school, and that is for the workforce. And when we can't show up when we want to, can't show up on a time that we want to, we have to be on time. So those are some of the conversations we have. But I do understand what you're saying in terms of the discipline and just setting up that accountability, self accountability for students. So but that is actually one of the tough subgroups we work with too. But moving on to meaningful engagement, we do have attendance support specialist team in Louisa County Schools. We have 5 actual attendance support specialists, and they work in tandem with our other team members in our school building. So of course, our school administration or their designee, school counselors, school social workers, and of course, our school secretaries, because they're part of that documentation piece, sending letters home and talking with parents and students. But one of the things we work with the parents and the families is that accountability, that meaningful engagement, and we work with them coming after school and on Saturdays for extended learning opportunities where they can have time with teachers, not just doing busy work. They actually are working on different things that they have to meaningfully engage in their assignments that they've missed, and also just it gives us opportunities for extended learning and remediation as well to work with those students. So that relationship with the parents and the families and talking with them about what some obstacles are for them coming to school. Like I mentioned before, the mental health pieces of it, those awareness would not come without those conversations with families. We've had other really sad stories that we've learned from parents. And part of it is you kind of push attendance to the side for a minute and talk with these families about what resources they might need, period. And it might be connecting them with the school social worker, it might be connecting them with community agencies, but our families are going through some hard times, as I'm sure yours are as well. So part of that is setting up those times to talk with them. Our attendance support specialists are constantly on the phone, constantly meeting with students, especially at the secondary level. And it really was a culture change for, like we talked about the medical pieces of it, coming out of the pandemic, every sniffle, every cough, you were staying home. We were telling them, please stay home. Now it was, please come when you're healthy. We want you here. And it goes into everything else that was said in terms of setting up the positive culture. We work really hard on that to make sure that it is a welcoming and safe environment for our students, and they feel that, and our teachers feel that. So our attendance support team, works with all the families and also talks with our teachers so that they are feeling invested in our efforts to address attendance, that when they do stay after school, they're aware of what they're working on after school. We have a whole communication process for that, of what they are working on. So for example, if you're an algebra teacher and your child, if the student has a D in the class, and part of that is because missed time in class, they are working on algebra work after school or on Saturdays for that extended learning pieces of it. So it's apples for apples or oranges for oranges, trying to make sure that they are not just using that time to do busy work, they're actually working on the things that they've missed and they're struggling with. So those are some of the things we work with our students and families about.
Yeah, and Carla, talk about this. You talked really fast, and I know we're rushing a little bit to make sure you have enough time. But so if a child misses, you and your 5 attendance specialists make contact with families.
We do.
Every single time a child misses school. You make personal connections.
We make personal connections every single time we talk with the families. At the secondary level, we meet with the students and the parent together, either virtually or by phone, or they actually do a lot of home visits as well. At the elementary level, it's mostly talking with the parents, but we do make those connections by phone, talking with them, and reminding them about some of the communication pieces that we've already talked about, the importance of attendance, of being there in school. We have talked with them about some of the obstacles that they're facing, working on addressing those obstacles, whether it be the mental health issues, whether it be some socioeconomic issues, that they don't have supplies, or they don't have. We had one student that wasn't coming to school because their clothes weren't clean. So we worked with them to try different things of that nature, making sure that they felt comfortable and safe and esteemed to come to school. So yes, we make those personal connections, and it's not possible to do that through a robocall, just a poster or a flyer sent home. You have to make those phone calls and those connections with parents and students.
And what have you've done this, you guys did this last year?
We did. Mm-hmm.
And you've engaged in it this year. What are you seeing differently in your community around attendance, around some of these issues? How has this all out effort in Louisa County that you're leading change just the culture in spaces?
So last year, I would say some of those conversations with parents were not always positive. They were a little bit challenging. Some of the parents were a little more, feeling like it was none of our business why they were out of school, that was not our call to make, and that was not anything that they needed to explain to us at all. But really, that was a short amount of time. Once we got the message through that the reason why we're inquiring, the reason why we're really trying to support them is because we really care about their students, that really has changed a whole lot. This year, the culture has been set, the expectations have been set. I think I'm most proud of the high school level because our high school level, like I said, we do involve the students in that process. And our high school attendance support specialist has an office based at the high school, and she'll have students lined up around the corner of the hallway for students who know that they have to make up their time. They know that they have to come and stay for extended learning and work on different assignments and in order to get a waiver for the day. But they are there. They're not even waiting for somebody to come and reach out to them or reach out to their parent. They're there waiting to make sure that they have set that up. We have students that even at the middle school level who come to extended learning and you're not quite expecting them, but they know that they were absent the day before. Well, I have to make up my time. I have to be here. It's important. So there definitely is a culture change this year. And we actually have been with things like this nature, we have had different districts and divisions come to us and ask us about, what are you doing differently? We here in Louisa, you take attendance very seriously. We hear that from parents. We hear that from school officials. And we tell them things that we're doing, and that is that we care about your student. One of the pieces that I left off in terms of our team is our teachers. And one of the things we feel very, very confident about is that we want our students to know that the reason why we want them in school is because we want them to learn. And in order to do that, our teachers have they have a part of the team too. So they are responsible for calling students, parents, and students, making contact with them to make sure that when they're absent at least 3 days, they have to at least talk with the parents and the students about, hey, I'm here for you. And just remember that your assignments are on Google Classroom. Make sure you know how to do makeup work. Make sure that you know that if there's anything I could do to support you. So they are part of that whole process and the contacting families and students as well, because that's the message we want to send. It's not just because we got to check this box off for the state or the federal government. We are checking this box off because we care about you and your future. So we want you to know that, we want to be here to help you with your assignments, help you with your work. And we care about that relationship. So the teachers are also part of that process too.
I love that. And I love that the whole overarching piece is meaningful engagement. And you just talked about something that is completely not about meaningful engagement and learning. You talked about the meaningful engagement you have with the families and the students, and really creating that culture of care and that culture of community, and making sure families know that we care, you're here, and we're going to help you figure out ways to be there. And I think that's very special. And I appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to, we are a little bit out of time, and I want to make sure Dr. Paragon has an opportunity. So I'm going to just let one or two people, if you want to ask Carla some quick questions, and we're going to turn it over to Dr. Paragon. Well, Carly, you did such a great job. I appreciate you sharing. I am quite sure that as these discussion guides come out with this video, people are going to be calling you even more, asking lots of questions. So
thank you for having me.
Appreciate you sharing this unique program in Louisa that really thinks about each child, making sure each child is cared about, that they know they need to be in school, and that their families know they have you and your team to support them in figuring out ways to make sure children come to school. So appreciate the work you're doing and your willingness to share. Dr. Paragon, I think you have a unique aspect and something that you really worked hard on thinking about. What happens if all of these things we're doing just aren't enough to help families understand the importance? And I know you've worked really hard to think about how do we support the families, but how do we help the families understand ultimately when the rubber meets the road that kiddos need to be to school. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you share a little bit as well.
Dr. Coons, I've actually changed my mind. I was going to talk about some legislation that we were going to introduce, but I think I'm going to change that now. And here's the new legislation, and I think we can end this task force immediately if we can get this legislation approved. All parents have to use Miss Olson's form of parenting when it comes to getting your children to school. If we could just get all of our parents to do that, I think we could solve the chronic absenteeism problem. Obviously, we know that we can't pull that off. And so at the risk of sounding like an ogre, let me say say this, and I think those of you who are on the call who know me, I'm not an ogre, but I'm probably going to sound like it after we've talked about all the unicorn kisses and all the rainbows and all the great things that we can do to encourage children to come to school. But there are times when we do all of those things, and I know that we're all doing those, and we still have children who are not coming to school. And what I've experienced through my years of education, I know that many of you on this call have as well, is when that happens and you're trying to reach out and engage with families and you're still not seeing success, that there's something deeper and darker going on, and we don't often have a way of knowing exactly what that is. And I think from that standpoint, schools and communities have a responsibility to support those children, maybe not necessarily the families in that situation, to support those children to make sure that there is not something more sinister going on in their homes. You'll find that when a student experiences regular neglect, physical neglect, emotional neglect, they're often also experiencing educational neglect. Schools, we found out during COVID, many of our students require or depend upon their school systems to provide the many of the services that they need that typically families were expected to provide, but that's not always happening. And so we also know that in families who experience poverty, that it's even more so educational neglect happens even more often. And so right now in Virginia, Virginia does not recognize educational neglect. They recognize physical neglect, emotional neglect, but educational neglect is not recognized by the Commonwealth of Virginia. More than half of the states in the United States do recognize that, and you will see if you look at those states, their attendance rates are better as well. And so what I recommend, based on a lot of research that Dr. Mabe did, because she experienced this, she serves a very high poverty school division, one of the highest schools. She serves one of the highest poverty schools in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, Washington Lee Elementary in Bristol, Virginia. And she's experienced this firsthand. So she did a lot of research about, not only how can we support families, how can we engage families, how can we create incentives? And all you have to do is look at the things she's put in the chat to know that that is her number one focus. But sometimes that doesn't work. And right now, the only people who are responsible for helping those kids are schools. Social services will not deal with students who miss too much school. Our courts are too overbooked with everything else as far as, the fentanyl crisis and everything else that's going on in our society. So courts aren't helpful when that happens. And so our recommendation, and we do think that we have sponsors who are going to take this legislation, is to make educational neglect part of the Virginia Code, not because we want to punish families or parents, but because we want to support those children who aren't getting the support that they need in their home, and we want to get them back into our schools.
Well, and Keith, I think you made a really important point. This is not like the first aspect. This is for those
Tier 3.
Those are for the tier 3, tier 4 situations. Yeah. But we have to have something in our toolbox after we do the engagement, after we do all these meaningful trackers, because when the rubber meets the road, as you said, it's about kids, and we have to ensure that those kids are supported. What would educational neglect look like? Can you kind of define what that might look like so that we have a better understanding of what that tier 4 kind of space might be?
And we're not looking at truancy. We're not recommending that this is truancy. Truancy is something completely different. Truancy is when a child chooses not to attend school and the parents maybe are trying to support them to make that happen. But we're talking about when a family, whether it's because the parents are, on drugs, or because the parents are leaving the child at home unattended, or for some reason that child's not coming to school, we want to get services to those families. Right now, if we call our local community service agency and say we're worried about little Billy because he's not coming to school, there's nothing to cause them to support that family. If we call DSS to say we're worried about little Billy because he's not coming to school, DSS not coming to school is not something that DSS serves. And so that child, and we can't get in touch with the child ourselves, regardless of the resources that we apply to it. So what we're trying to do through this is try to attach those families to the resources that are there. Obviously it won't be budget neutral, I don't think, because, DSS is already, they're slammed with all the things that they're doing. Our community service agencies are slammed with the things that we're doing. But hopefully by recognizing that, chronic absenteeism is one of the greatest problems I think that our Commonwealth faces today, but there are no resources to help address it. And I think this would be one resource if educational neglect was part of the code, that would get some resources funneled in that direction.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think it's important for us to talk about all of these pieces collaboratively, right? About the parent engagement and ultimately the level of support that some families might need to be engaged. And I think that's an important conversation, as much as it is for us to have conversations about building relationships and hospitality training for the front desk and making sure we have bionic programs and attendance captains. It's also important to talk about what happens when all of those things don't work. So I think it was a great opportunity to hear the entire spectrum tonight and hear about all things that think about families. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk about transportation last time and talk about all things transportation, but we wanted to really talk about all things families tonight and think about all of the different things that go into that component, because today more than ever, our families have to be side by side with us. And there are a lot of things we can do to build those relationships and a lot of opportunities we have, but there's some accountability in that space too. And I really appreciate Dr. Peregrine leading the way to talk about all that entire perspective. Want to give
promise. Those of you who don't know me, I promise I'm not an ogre. I'm not.
He's got great
kids.
Tier 1 strategies too for attendance as well, and Tier 2. Yeah, and really appreciate the opportunity that he's willing to take that entire spectrum and that entire effort to make sure that we have children first and that our children are able to attend school every day, because it is truly, we are seeing the game changer. If our children are attending school every day, we are changing opportunities in their lives. And if they're not, we have to take absolutely every effort to go there. So want to give everybody an opportunity to kind of close us out over the next 5 or 6 minutes and share out before we head into the rest of the week and thinking and continuing to spread the word about how important attendance is for our families. So just want to give everybody an opportunity.
Well, Dr. Coons, with what Keith just presented, I was sitting here thinking that, when I think about rural communities, because that's where I am and that's where I've been, is that when we think about the educational neglect and what that would look like and so forth. But I think about our CSA and the resources when parents and families were referred to like a FAP team, which is a family assessment and planning team, that there are funds available for parent mentors and parent aides that go into homes of families and teach them the different routines and different things such as that. A locality always doesn't have funding for that. So I think there needs to be state funding that makes these resources available, because that can be a game changer, whether it's 10 to 20 hours a month for families and so forth, just looking at those resources.
Yeah, good flag. I'm definitely taking notes. Definitely something for us all to take notes about. So that's a good flag. I know a couple people are jumping, but I see Tian's hand up, so I want to give her a chance as well. Thank you. Thanks, Chip. I think that's important.
I just have one really quick question. The resource provided by Attendance Work of the chart showing when we can send kids to school related to the health conditions, and has that information been distributed to each division yet?
Nope. All of the resources we talk about tonight will be packaged and shared out. We hope to share out session 1 and session 2 this week in the newsletter. So we plan to send all of those things out. So we wanted to talk through them here first and then have the discussion and then share them with school divisions. So yep, great question.
Thank you.
And just a note on that, on almost all of our resources, with permission, you can put your school or district logo on it so that it can be seen as belonging to your school, your district. So you just have to ask permission when you download the documents. You can do that.
Great. And Laura, is there a way we could do that in the newsletter? We could put that permission process as well, so that we could do that for all school divisions.
It's right on the website, Lisa. It shows what you have to do. It's really very simple.
Okay, I'll make sure we include that in the newsletter. So that's great feedback.
Laura, I just want to say, I don't know how you did it, but when you put your hand up, it filled in the hand on your background. It was really cool.
It takes
She's a Zoom
practice.
expert. She's a Zoom expert for sure. Well, thanks, everybody. I think these conversations are so critical to the future of our children and the thought partnership and leadership here and the ability to capture these and then redeliver them to school divisions so they can have their own conversations around these critical topics. So I know it's 6 p.m. on a Tuesday night, and it's the week that things get dark early, so it feels even later. So I sincerely appreciate everyone's commitment, collaboration, and conversation. It's very powerful for our students. So thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.